By chance, I met this woman, Ashley, who told me she was the owner of a popular fancy restaurant and invited me to visit. I'm not much of a food connoisseur. My taste buds aren't that refined. I kept refusing because a fancy restaurant just didn't seem like my style, but she persisted, saying, "I won't be satisfied otherwise," which made me think of our usual mini reunion. It's been over 10 years since we graduated from high school. We were a close-knit group of classmates who gathered about once a year. I thought it would be a good idea to use her restaurant for our mini reunion. Of course, I said we would pay for the food and drinks. 5 guests, if Mike is coming, then. She even offered to let us use it for free, but I insisted on paying. I set a budget and reserved a private room at that price. That Oakwood place, right? I'm surprised you managed to book it. When I told one of the reunion members, Jessica, she was quite shocked. The Oakwood I had booked turned out to be a highly popular place with a 3-year waiting list for reservations. Incidentally, back in high school, there was a misunderstanding that Jessica and I were dating. Well, we weren't unpleasant to each other. We got along, in a way. But whenever we met, we always ended up arguing. Yet, even after 10 years, we still keep in touch. It's what you might call a complicated relationship. That's what I've always thought. I've heard it's a fancy place, but places like that can be disappointing. Here we go again. She started criticizing my choice. I could picture her making a feisty face on the other side of the phone. "Don't come if you don't want to. I'll go, because..." She hesitated. I knew why. Because this year is special, after all. While it was a regular reunion, this time was not just any mini reunion. Still, it's weird, isn't it? She was fixated on how I chose and managed to book this restaurant. Because Mike, you prefer more casual places, right? She sensed there was something more to it. Her intuition was not to be underestimated. But given the circumstances, I couldn't just openly talk about it. Persistent, aren't you? It doesn't matter either way. I managed to dodge the question. The circumstances I didn't share even with my complicated friend. My unexpected encounter with Ashley, the young owner of the restaurant. I work on the manufacturing line at a commercial kitchen equipment factory, and I usually finish work on time due to my shift schedule. But about 10 days ago, that night, I had to work overtime due to a large order. Since the next day was a day off, I ended up going out for drinks and dinner with my colleagues. That's why I was walking home late, and it was just after 11 p.m. when I passed by a playground near my house. As I strolled by, slightly tipsy, I sensed someone in the corner of the park. I could hear voices and, under the nearby street light, make out the faint outlines of 2 figures. It was a man and a woman, one-on-one. I assumed it was just a young couple getting cozy in the park at night. I was single and didn't have a girlfriend. I was curious, and part of me was even a bit excited at the thought that they might start a romantic scene. But I didn't want to witness that, so I decided to quickly walk by. However, the next moment, the mumbling voices suddenly turned into a scream close to a cry for help from the woman. It was a clear call for help. I involuntarily stopped in my tracks and looked towards the park. The couple was scuffling. The woman pushed the man away. The man, who fell on his buttocks, looked up at the woman and yelled something. As I stood there watching, the woman ran towards me. Meanwhile, I noticed something shiny in the hand of the man sitting on the ground. A knife. It was definitely some kind of blade. I didn't know the details, but it was clear there was a violent dispute. I was just a passerby. I didn't want to get involved, but I couldn't just ignore it either. While I was thinking about what to do, my body, embarrassingly, froze as if I was petrified, unable to move. Then, the woman rushed over and clung to me. Instinctively, I shouted, "Hey you," at the manual. At that, The man flinched and then ran off as if he was rolling away. I watched the man's retreating figure in a daze. It seemed unlikely that the man would return, and I even felt grateful that he had run away. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not confident in my physical strength. If he had come at me, I wouldn't have stood a chance. "Thank you very much," the woman said, bringing me back to reality. She was dressed casually in jeans, and she looked about my age or slightly older. This woman was Ashley, the young owner of the restaurant. "Are you okay? Any injuries?" "Yes, thanks to you, I'm fine," she said, combing her long black hair that had become disheveled with her fingers. I looked in the direction the man had fled and turned back to her, asking, "Who was that guy? Shouldn't we call the police?" She then looked down, sighed, and her shoulders slumped. I escorted her to a safe place where there were more people around. On the way, she shared her story with me. That man was a former apprentice chef at the restaurant where she worked as a young owner. He was inept and constantly got scolded by his seniors and the head chef, so she had intervened on his behalf once out of pity. However, he misunderstood her kindness as personal interest in him. At first, he was just overly friendly at work, but then he started asking her out on dates and waiting for her after work, escalating his behavior. Distressed, she had a meeting with her father, who was also the owner of the restaurant. There, she made it clear to the man that she had no romantic feelings for him. Following that, the man quit the restaurant. That was supposed to be the end of it. But tonight, somehow he knew I was visiting a friend and suddenly approached me on my way back. That's what led to the commotion. Fortunately, she wasn't injured, and since the man was timid by nature, they decided to have her father sternly reprimand him again. They didn't want to involve the police because it could affect the restaurant's reputation. I couldn't help but worry if a timid person like him might cause more trouble later, but I decided not to interfere further. As we parted, she invited me to her restaurant as a gesture of gratitude. "Well, maybe some other time," I replied, intending it as a mere formality, and we exchanged contact information. "Definitely, I'll be waiting," she said. She looked at me with tearful eyes and said. A few days later, she contacted me and invited me back to the inn. I was hesitant about the formality of it all and didn't think the fancy restaurant was my style, so I declined. "Please let me thank you. After all, Mike, you're my life's savior." Eventually, being elevated to the status of a lifesaver, I was at my wit's end. Despite my repeated attempts to decline, she persisted with, "I won't be satisfied otherwise." That led me to the idea of hosting our usual mini reunion at her restaurant. On the day of the mini reunion, the group consisted of me, Jessica, who was once mistaken for my girlfriend, and 3 others, 2 men and 1 woman, making a total of 5. We met at the nearest station and headed to the restaurant, but the grand entrance alone intimidated all 5 of us. It feels out of place, like I might wet my pants. In an era of accessibility, this threshold is too high. I don't even know how to order wine. My heart is full before my stomach is. Voices of unease came from everyone. I too wanted to run away if possible. But as it turned out, I was the organizer this time. Gathering my courage, I led the way through the gate. After I gave my name for the reservation, a receptionist in a nice suit guided us to a private room. Once we were inside the private room, it was exclusively ours. This helped ease everyone's tension a bit. "Tyler must be freaking out being brought to a place like this," Jessica whispered, still seemingly nervous. I whispered back, "It's fine to experience this once in a lifetime." "Oh wait, it's not just once in a lifetime, is it?" Then everyone looked at each other and burst into laughter. Everyone burst into laughter, not because Jessica and I were whispering. It was because of what I said about it not being once in a lifetime for Tyler. Tyler was the 6th member of our group who was supposed to be here. 2 years ago, he suddenly passed away in a traffic accident, another friend of ours. This mini reunion was special not just as a tradition, but also as the 3rd anniversary of his passing. It might be disrespectful to laugh about Tyler, but we've come to a point where we can. Finally. Soon, drinks and food were served, and the reunion, doubling as a memorial for Tyler, began. 2 of the 3 other attendees, a bit shyly, announced they were a couple. The remaining man, Ethan, congratulated them, saying Tyler would be surprised to see them outdoing me and Jessica. What do you mean, outdoing me and Jess? Yeah, there's nothing going on between Mike and me. Jessica and I objected in unison, while Ethan just grinned. This Ethan. In high school, he was one of those who firmly believed Jessica and I were a couple. Even now. But it was Tyler, not Ethan, who had spread the rumor about Jessica and me in high school. Really, he was such a troublemaker. I wish he could apologize, even now. Though Tyler was no longer with us, we fondly remembered and missed him despite our complaints. Mike, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming today. As the room began to grow somber, Ashley, the young restaurant owner with her long black hair tied up, came to greet us. She noticed my empty glass and, coming closer, gracefully offered to pour me a drink. "Oh, we're handling it ourselves." I gently declined, but she took a seat beside me regardless. Jessica clicked her tongue softly. The others were also disillusioned. "Ashley, a moment," I whispered in her ear before standing up and calling her to a corner of the room. "We're in the middle of something. Did I intrude?" When I apologized and lowered my head, she glanced over everyone before reluctantly leaving the room. "The food might be good, but the portions are so small, I can't really taste anything," I mumbled after we finished the course meal, and everyone agreed. Until then, they had been silent out of consideration for me, who had made the reservation. "How about leaving here and going to a casual bar nearby and have some normal snacks and drinks?" No one objected to Jessica's suggestion. Once we made up our minds, things moved quickly. We quickly left the private room and, with Ashley's polite smile sending us off, moved from the fancy restaurant to a casual bar. The restaurant is so popular that people have to be on a 3-year waiting list, but a bar suited us better than a restaurant. While reminiscing about old times, we drank and ate heartily. The dishes we ordered included classic potato salad and fries, salmon and potato skillet, potato tacos, and croquettes. How much do we love potatoes? Our mini reunion lasted until the last train. Only Jessica and I were left on the train home. We often took the same train home in high school. Being on the same train home was also taken as proof we were dating, wasn't it? I said, looking at Jessica's reflection in the train window that had turned mirror-like in the dark. "That's right. It was Tyler who spread that rumor." The reflection of her in the window nodded. Tyler was determined to make us a couple for some reason. But then again, he told you that he liked you, didn't he? This time, she didn't nod. I heard it from him. He said he got rejected by Jess. "I didn't reject him or anything," she said in her usual argumentative tone, glaring at my reflection in the window. I looked away from the window and directly at her face. I didn't dislike Tyler, but we were always together with everyone, weren't we? So she refused to single out anyone from our group for a romantic relationship. However, Tyler took this as her having feelings for me. Trying to play Cupid or just being a class clown, he spread rumors about us, attempting to set us up as a couple. He was really stupid. Really, that's true. The calls from Ashley, the young owner of the restaurant, continued even after that day. She still insisted she hadn't properly thanked me. No matter how much I said it was enough, she stubbornly repeated, "I won't be satisfied otherwise." She might have been very conscientious, but it was nothing but a nuisance for me. But because she meant no harm, It made it all the more difficult to deal with. So, I decided to let her treat me to lunch at some casual place on my day official. Ashley showed up in casual clothes with her hair down, just like the first time we met. We quickly entered an affordable chain restaurant. She was cheerful and satisfied throughout the lunch. Her father had dealt with that man, and there had been no trouble since then. When I told her I worked at a commercial kitchen equipment manufacturing plant, her face lit up, and she asked if I could arrange maintenance for her restaurant's kitchen. "I'll have our sales team take care of it," I responded. Then she quickly withdrew her request, saying, "If it won't count towards your achievements." We finished our meal in about an hour and left the restaurant before 2 p.m. As I thanked her for the meal, she seemed like she still wanted to take me somewhere else, asking, "Was this okay for you? Please, don't start with the 'I won't be satisfied otherwise' again." I prayed inwardly as I checked my phone. There was a missed call from Ethan during the meal. I listened to the voicemail immediately. "What? Jess has?" My exclamation made Ashley, who was next to me, widen her eyes in surprise. I excused myself, saying something urgent had come up, and rushed off. Jessica, had been injured and taken to the hospital. I hurried to the emergency hospital Ethan mentioned in his message. On the way, I couldn't help but remember that day 2 years ago. The day Tyler had his accident. It was Ethan who had informed me then, too. And just like now, I had rushed to the hospital. But by the time I arrived, Tyler was already gone. As I entered the hospital where Jessica was taken, I found all the mini reunion members gathered in the lobby. They had all been informed from Ethan's network. Jessica was there among them, leaning on crutches. Her injuries weren't as severe as I had feared. "Hey, Jess, you okay?" As I approached, Jessica stuck out her tongue sheepishly. It had happened earlier that day. She was on her way to her favorite salon to get a haircut, traveling alone by train. While standing near the train door, playing with her phone, she felt something moving around her waist. Looking down, she saw a man sticking close to her. Until then, she had been too engrossed in her phone to notice, but the train wasn't crowded, and the man's proximity felt unnatural. It was a molester. I thought it might be a misunderstanding, so I just watched for a while. But the man got bolder and started groping her more aggressively. Deciding there was no doubt about his intentions, she twisted his wrist. I shouted, "This man is molesting me." Just then, the train arrived at the station. As the doors opened, the molester stepped onto the platform. Not wanting to let him escape, Jessica chased after him and tackled him from behind. They scuffled on the ground. He was desperate, too. Kicked me, and I got thrown off, hitting my shin against a pole, cracking the bone. The molester was eventually detained by station staff and handed over to the police. "That's what you get for being reckless," I scolded her. "What could I do?" Jessica pouted in response. I argued that there was no need to chase after him once he fled. "What, so I should just let it go?" "It's not about letting it go. What if he had been more violent or had a weapon? It could have been more than just a cracked bone." Jessica turned her face away from me, clearly annoyed. "That guy, picking someone with such a strong-looking face like yours. Maybe he was just dazzled by my overwhelming charm. Were you flaunting your midriff or something?" Ethan and the others intervened as Jessica and I bickered. I felt ashamed for blurting out something I didn't mean. "What's with you, after making everyone worry so much?" "Sorry, thanks for coming all this way," Jessica said, lowering her head meekly. Every time we argued, one of us would end up apologizing, and that would be the end of it. That was typical for Jessica and me. But this time was different. "You came, but you were the last one to arrive, right, Mike?" Oh, that's because. It's not a complaint or anything, just." Jessica gave me a probing look. "I didn't notice the call," I stammered in response. It wasn't work today, right? She could see right through me. Were you on a date or something? Her intuition was always sharp. But it wasn't exactly a date. So I clarified. No, it's not exactly a date. Then I realized what I had implied. I had just given myself away. Sorry for interrupting. Say hi to your girlfriend for me. As we left the emergency hospital, Jessica said, "Thanks for coming on your day off," to everyone. She insisted she could go home alone, but since we were heading in the same direction, I decided to accompany her. She wanted to take the train to avoid unnecessary expenses, but on the way to the station, I hailed a taxi and we both got in. It was somewhat awkward. "Are you mad?" I asked tentatively. "Mad about what?" "I'm just reflecting on making everyone worry unnecessarily about me being late today. It wasn't a date," I explained, and she gave me an exasperated look. "Really, it wasn't a date?" "Look, Mike, whether you're dating or not doesn't matter to me. I'm just grateful you cared enough to come. After all, we were just old high school classmates bound by a long-standing connection." Was she trying to say it was nothing more and nothing less? But still, today wasn't a date, not at all. I wasn't satisfied. I didn't want Jessica to think I had been on a date with Ashley, the young owner of the restaurant. So, I shared with her the story of how I met Ashley, something I hadn't told anyone before. After hearing my story, Jessica, with a half-teasing smile, said, "Seems like you were quite pursued. Not entirely displeased, were you?" "Stop joking. I was really troubled," I protested. Jessica nodded quietly. A few evenings later, I had decided to make potato casserole for dinner, so after buying the ingredients on my way home, I hurried back. As I approached the familiar playground, I decided to take a shortcut through it. Cutting across the park would be faster. So, I veered off the path and headed towards the park. Right after that moment, "Ah, it's you." Right after I entered, a young man with both hands gripping a knife and squatting awkwardly blocked my path. I knew immediately who it was. It was the man who had been following Ashley. His hands were trembling as he held the knife. Even with my lack of confidence in physical confrontations, I felt I might be able to handle him. "I'm going to catch this guy." A surge of combativeness swelled up within me, and I took a step forward. But at that moment, my legs got tangled, and I fell forward dramatically. My dramatic fall surprised him too, causing him to drop the knife and fall on his rear. I jumped on the man, pinning him down, and shouted for help. A neighbor called the police, and the arriving officers took the man into custody. The man was indeed a former apprentice chef from Ashley's restaurant. Previously, I had stumbled upon him having a dispute with Ashley, and it ended up looking like I had come to her rescue. Since then, he had regarded me as an enemy. Not only did he harbor unrequited love for Ashley, but he also mistakenly believed I was a rival for her affections. His jealousy exploded after hearing that I had lunch with Ashley, leading to his attack. After giving my statement to the police, I was taken to the hospital. In the process of dramatically falling in front of the man, I ended up spraining one of my ankles. I was now dependent on crutches for a while. "You're one to talk about being reckless." Informed by Ethan's network, Jessica also came to visit, crutches in hand. I thought I could catch him. He was squatting and trembling, after all. What if he had been more dangerous than you thought and had used that weapon on you? It could have been more than just a sprain. Jessica had a point, but I was somewhat annoyed and turned away from her. "What's with you? Making everyone worry so much." When I heard Mike was attacked by a thug and got hurt, Jessica's voice trailed off as she sniffled. Turning to her, I saw her eyes red and brimming with tears. "I'm sorry." Jessica quietly wiped away her tears. Then she gave a silent nod. Normally, our arguments would end as soon as one of us apologized, even if it had escalated to a shouting match. But this time, Seeing her tears, I couldn't just let it end there. I'll say it again, just to be clear, that last time wasn't a date. I told you, I don't care about that. Stop being so persistent. I'm not being persistent. I just want to make things clear. Fine, I'll let it slide then, Jessica said, crossing her arms and turning away. That sounds a bit grudging. What else should I say then? Imitating Ashley, I suggested. I won't be satisfied otherwise, maybe. Jessica then slowly turned her head and glared at me. I smiled back and said, if I were to go on a date, Jess would be my choice. I could tell Jessica was taken aback. Picking up my crutches, I proposed. How about a crutch date for both of us? It's impossible. I'm not confident I can walk properly, she replied. I'm not confident either, but that's okay, isn't it? We can just waddle along together. At my second smile, she shyly nodded her head in agreement,